This is a video for my administrative law class, and we're going to do a quick overview of our chapter or unit about executive controls of agencies. My legislation and regulation class may also find this useful. And for my students, this is the intent here is just to hit the highlights of what you should be watching for or expecting as we go through the materials and the different cases that we're going to study. Some students may also find it helpful as a quick big picture review at the end of the unit to make sure you didn't miss anything crucial, or to kind of test yourself. Could you articulate what each of the points are about? We're not going to do a lot of explanation here. It's just a quick sort of signposting of what to expect in this unit of the course. Okay, so again, we have this issue about the way the executive branch exercises control over the agencies, and typically we're talking about the president in an administrative law class. On the state level, of course, this could apply to the governor. It depends. Constitutionally, the appointment and removal of the top directors of the agency is the number one way that the president gets to implement policy. So the president campaigns, let's say a candidate campaigns, we're going to do this and this and this. Well, all of those things that the president promised to do, the president's not going to do individually. They're going to use the executive branch and the federal government to do it, to implement those policy decisions and goals and priorities and so forth. So the presidents generally get to appoint the people who are the top people at most of the agencies. We'll talk about a couple of exceptions as we go through the chapters. So this could be the secretary or administrator or director of different types of agencies, and therefore presidents get to pick someone to direct the agency who agrees, shares the president's vision, or agrees to implement their policy initiatives and so forth. And most of the time, with some caveats that we'll talk about as we go through this chapter or unit, presidents can remove agency directors if they get frustrated with them or the agency director is refusing to implement the president's policy. So now keep in mind, the president doesn't get to completely clean house and fire everybody that works for the agency or something like that. We don't have a spoils system in our country in modern times, but they do get to appoint the top person, and sometimes the top, like, kind of two tiers, let's say, of directors and agency officials who are going to be making the big picture policy decisions. Next, presidents can issue and do issue executive orders and other directives, similar directives. Sometimes we call them memoranda and so forth. So they have different names. And these kind of are the put in writing how the president wants to implement policy throughout the executive branch agencies. So this will be internal spending and budgeting. So Congress gives the overall allocation for the agency as a whole, but then the president is going to give some written directives about how to spread that money around within an agency. And this gives the president power essentially to defund a small department or office or something like that and shutter it, and or to expand another office because that office is doing something, that implementing a policy or taking policy initiatives that are important to the president. Also, policies and priorities. So the president can issue executive orders and so forth saying, I want everybody to do this, to outsource more government services, or to do this certain type of training for your employees, or stop doing these trainings for your federal employees. And can also say, I want you to prioritize, this agency should prioritize this type of case. So if you think about during a pandemic, for example, the president telling the FDA, shift all of your resources around so you can prioritize vaccine development and approval or emergency approval of vaccines and therapeutics for a disease. Or we could tell the Environmental Protection Agency, we're more concerned about, let's say, water pollution this year than air pollution. Let's say we're doing well in an area, and we can say, we want you to step up enforcement in a certain area. Also, internal organization, the president can kind of shape the internal organization or org chart, reassign certain offices or sub offices within the chain of command within an agency. Now, if you haven't had the pleasure of working for a large entity like an institution or a big corporation, um, or a government agency yet, it may escape you how important this can be to your day-to-day life as a lower level employee or mid-level manager if you're now reporting to a different person. And that could be someone that you don't get along with, or somebody that you get along with a lot better, who's telling you to kind of go for it and to do more, and so forth. So the rearranging where different entities or individuals are in the chain of command and the org chart can have some pretty significant effects on day-to-day life in the agency and how they go about their business. Also very important, but not popularly understood, is the president can order agencies to collaborate on things, or even tell one agency that they always have to get permission for certain actions from another agency. So for example, imagine an executive order that tells the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Enforcement Agency, to cooperate more with Homeland Security or the Immigration Service or something like that. Or where the president tells the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to collaborate with the Department of Transportation on making regulations about fuel-efficient cars. Or tailpipe emissions for cars or things like that. So the president can order agencies to work together, or even one agency can't do something unless the other agency signs off on it. And the most important example of that is my bottom point here, which is the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, and the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, or OIRA, within the OMB. And this is going to be a unit in this chapter that we talk about, is the control of the OMB. And basically most executive agencies have to get the OMB, and specifically OIRA, within an office within the OMB, to sign off or approve the new regulations before they promulgate them or publish them in the Federal Register, and different types of materials that the agency wants to publish. A lot of things agencies want to do, they have to get permission from the OMB first. So this is an important thing that's going on in the background of the federal bureaucracy. Also, remember that the president, for example, has a lot of control over the litigation and enforcement by agencies that goes on through the Attorney General or the Solicitor General, because these are presidential appointees and usually have made a commitment. The president usually appoints someone who shares their vision and their policy beliefs and so forth, and makes a commitment that they're going to implement the president's agenda, so to speak. So most of the agencies can't bring in actions in court on their own. Some do, but not all, and are dependent on the Attorney General and for implementation or enforcement in the courts to bring lawsuits, for example. The Solicitor General does more civil cases. So let's say the United States is a party to a lawsuit, either as a defendant or a plaintiff, and that's often going to go through the Solicitor General's office. And again, this is an important policy position. Moreover, the US Supreme Court has developed this custom in recent years of asking the Solicitor General to file amicus briefs in high-profile Supreme Court cases so that they know what the administration, i.e. the president's position is on the case. In other words, if you're wondering, does the president get to file amicus briefs or amicus briefs on hotly contested Supreme Court cases? The answer is yes, basically through the Solicitor General or Solicitor General's office that works closely with the White House. Also, keep in mind that the president or the governor in a state can hold press conferences or issue press releases that include commitments to action. And so, for example, during the pandemic in 2020, we went through a period where we had these daily coronavirus news briefings or press conferences where they would ask questions. And a lot of times the president would just announce, I'm going to have the CDC do this, or the FDA do this, or Health and Human Services do this other thing. and so forth. And they announce policy, and hopefully they've talked to people in the agency before they make announcements. But if you work for a government agency, you'll find out, sometimes you find out what you're going to be doing the next week by watching the evening news, because so an executive branch official has a type of access to the media that other government officials don't have. The president calls a press conference, it's probably going to be aired on a lot of the networks. So people are watching. And then this basically becomes a public promise that an agency or certain agency officials are going to take certain actions. And that can have a lot of influence over what those agency officials actually do, and how quickly they do it. Okay, so that concludes our quick overview of executive branch controls, or the chief executive's control over the administrative agencies. And most of our cases are going to be about one of these types of topics: appointment and removal powers, these internal memorandum, the direct policy by the agency, or the direction of enforcement or non-enforcement in some cases by the president, and occasionally an executive official making an announcement to the media about what policy is going to be, and that ends up basically shaping the policy that comes after.